Okay, Shalom Aleichem for the people that are here, and hope Bezras Hashem the Zman should go well, and we should all be zeicha to a Ksiv Chazima Taiva. Obviously, Tafshin Pei Daled this year has been a difficult year for Klal Yisrael. Many people are suffering. This week, people were murdered, or at least we found that people were murdered. Hashem Yinkam Damam. And B'ezras Hashem, we hope that the new year should be a very, very different year of bracha. So we're continuing with the Even Shelemah, and we're in the middle of Perek Yud. It's a long Perek. Perek Yud deals with a lot of things in Yanim of Eilam Haba, Gehenom, what happens when a person dies. It's a very, very difficult Perek for a lot of reasons, because Even Shelemah anyway, as you know and I've said many times, is not a sefer written by the Gra. It is a likut. It's an anthology of different things the Gra said in many, many different places. The core of it is his Perush on Mishlei, but then there are many, many things the Gra wrote on the Zohar, Tikunei Zohar, Zohar Chadash, or Sefer Yetzirah. And the editor of Even Shelemah, who was originally Rav Shmuel Malson, and then an enlarged version was his son, Rav Yitzchak Malson, who was actually a very meforsam gaon, if you're familiar with the Sefer Shavisas Shabbos. So a very Yesedistic Sefer in Hilchos Shabbos. He was the Mechaber. He also wrote a very beautiful Perush on the Siddur called Isha Yisrael. So if you know the Siddur, called Siddur Hagra. So the Perush on the so-called Siddur Hagra is from Rav Yitzchak Malson, who was also the second mechaber of the Even Shelemah. So it's an anthology, and that's why after each shtickle there'll be a Mara Makam that'll tell you where it is. But in this inyan, like the Gra says different things in different places, and sometimes they contradict each other, and the Gra is not miyashiv necessarily the stiris mimakam l'makam. So that's why it's sometimes difficult to reconstruct a complete picture, because the Gaon said, the Gaon had infinite understanding of Torah, so the Gra would sometimes say this thing, and sometimes say that thing, and sometimes say that thing, and this is over many, many years in many different places. And he didn't always consciously be miyashev what he said. And number one, because his Talmidim were always with themselves very great Talmidei Chachamim. Maybe they didn't need him to explain Pashut Dvarim. And number two, maybe they didn't get it either sometimes, that the Gra was beyond. And sometimes you actually find the Talmidim of the Gra says, Kach Shamanu, this is what we heard, but we don't fully understand. So it is going to be a little difficult, and I will not always be able to reconcile everything. But okay, so we're in Perek Yud. Let's see where we should start today. Yeah, we'll start from Sif Yud. I think we may have done this, but whatever, it's been a few weeks. B'yeis hamisa, at the time of a person's death, azu yaim hadin hachazak miyait. There is a very, very powerful, strict yaim hadin, judgment by Hashem at the moment of a person's death. Kamosha Kasov, and this is Merumaz in the Navi Safanya, Yaim Hashem HaGadol Mar Tzareach Sham Gibor. Now, it's interesting why he brings from Safanya, because there is a better known pasuk from Malachi, which is the Haftarah of Shabbos HaGadol, that says Hashem will send us Eliyahu Hanavi Lifnei Bo Hashem HaGadol V'Hanayra. However, it's very meduyak why the Gemara does not bring that pasuk, because in that pasuk, the Yaim Hashem Hagadol V'Hanayra is not referring to a person's individual day of death. That's referring to the end of days when there'll be Techiyas HaMesim. So Hashem is going to bring back even the Rishayim to paskin on them. So that's referring to the Yaim Hadin Hagadol by Techiyas HaMesim. But here the Gra is referring to a different Yom Hadin, and that's the private Yom Hadin that every person undergoes when he dies. Now, it's meduyak that the pasuk in Sefania, which talks about Yom Hashem Agadol, is talking about the individual Yom Adin, because of the end of the pasuk that says, Mar Somayach Sham Gibor, which means the mighty one will cry bitterly on that day. Meaning, you were important, a person was important, a person was powerful, a person was wealthy, but then comes the Yom HaMisa, and the Yom HaMisa, none of his wealth is going to help him, none of his power is going to help him. Even the mighty Gibor will be Somayach, will cry on that day. So that's the Yom Din Kosha of the Yom HaMisa. V'haneshama kaidem maisai. The neshama before its death, hu baraglayim. So it's not clear what he means. He says the neshama relocates to your feet. It's almost as if the neshama runs away from the malach hamavis. So it descends from the moach or the lave down to the feet, down to the raglayim. Utsricha lahalos l'gayren bebeis habliya. So apparently the malach hamavis takes the neshama from the mouth or from the nose, and therefore the neshama has to be brought up from the raglayim. Now, once again, we don't even know what that means. I mean, it has to be this. The neshama is not a physical thing. So what do you mean the neshama goes through here or goes through here? What does that mean? Second of all, once you're gonna talk about it as a physical process, how does the malach hamavis get it? Does he go in? I mean, if the pshat is the neshama is in my feet, the malach hamavis like sticks his hand down your throat to pull it up. So bichlal, we don't really fully understand this, but this is somehow how spiritually it is described. It is described as the neshama is in the raglayim, and it has to come up derech hagorim. Now, one might understand this derech mashal a little bit, because the raglayim represents man's physicality, right? I walk towards my taivas or whatever it would be. The gorain, the throat, may represent certain elements of ruchnius, because it's through the gorain that we do Torah and tefillah. So maybe the concept is, in the last moments of death, the Rasha, who lived his life based on Gashmias, will seek refuge in that Gashmias. Right? That's why it goes to the Gashmias, because the money, all of the Gashmias that it thought was so important in its life, it's going to go to that Gashmias for protection. But that Gashmias will not protect it, because it is only the Gorain, the Torah and the Tefillah of the mouth that is important. Okay, well, we'll come back to this. But then he says the following: V'oz, when the neshama comes out of the Gorain, muchrach lirais hashechina, the neshama encounters the Shekhinah. It has some type of visualization of the Shekhinah. Now, the Shekhinah is not the same as Hashem. It's a certain manifestation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu that can be visualized. And this is true, Bein Tzaddik, Bein Rasha. Every neshama sees the Shekhinah at the moment of death, whether it's a tzaddik or a rasha. But the difference is, Birasha HaShechina mistalekes tekef. In the case of a rasha, the rasha has a gaze of the Shekhinah, and the Shekhinah is then mistalek, leaving the rasha in the hands of the Malach HaMaves, and the Malach HaMaves is mitzayer him. V'yatzei nishmasai, and pulls his neshama out, kipiture befi veshet, as a rope is pulled through the holes in the side of a boat. If you remember, this is taken from Taka, the Gemara in Brachos, that talks about there are different types of deaths, and the death that is the easiest is what's called Misas Neshika. It's a kiss of Hashem. That's how Moshe and Aaron and Miriam died. And the Gemara describes that death as taking a hair out of a bowl of milk. Very smooth, there's no pressure. There's another type of death, which is like schlepping a rope that is very tightly embedded. Right, when you have a rope that you got to pull the ship, right? So the rope is very tight in there because you don't want to pull the rope and it'll come out of the hole. So some people's death is like benisa b'chalba, a hair in a bowl of milk. And some people's death is kipiture b'fi veshet, like a rope tightly wedged into a hole. And here the Gemara says that a Rasha's death is described as pulling the rope out of the hole. Now again, here the idea is very pashut, because the Rasha lived for Gashmiya, so the Rasha's neshama wants to stay in the guf. It wants to stay in the guf. So to pull it out of the guf, Kaviyachal, is a big struggle. The tzaddik, on some level, is happy to connect to Hashem in Olam Haba. So the tzaddik is zeicha to misas neshika. The Rasha will be kipiture b'fi veshet. Aval b'tzadik, ein shechina mistalakas mimenu. When the tzaddik sees the shechina remains with him. Ad shemolichasai limkaimai, until he comes to his makom in Gan Eden. So Hashem is molava the neshama to Gan Eden. V'nishmasai yaitza b'neshika. So again, I mean, it seems to be, I'm not sure how this works, because if the neshika happens when he reaches Gan Eden, that means Hashem is meilech him in his guf. And what does that mean exactly? I mean, you see somebody die, they die. But it seems to be the neshama does not separate from the guf until Hashem is molech him to his makom in Gan Eden. And then there is misas neshika, which seems to be, now who is the tzaddik? That, maybe this is only, a yachid b'dora, but it seems to be that the Malach HaMavis doesn't take the neshama at all. It's taken by HaKadosh Baruch Hu through misas neshika, and then ushleishes avos yaitzem mikrasei. When the tzaddik is brought to his place in Gan Eden, he is greeted by the three avos, Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. V'hein keneged shleisha malachim hamavakrim ma'asav. And this corresponds to the three angels. Now, this is something that he talks about Viter, actually. Just to remind you a little ahead. Actually, it's the next simon, but we looked at this. It mentions that before a person dies, there are three angels that come to look over his life. One angel, one malach, calculates all of the minutes that he was in the world and determines what did he do with each minute. Now, the second angel calculates the Averis. So what's the difference here? There's angel 1, angel 2, angel 3. Angel 1 makes a calculation of what he did. So he must mean, the Gemara must mean the mitzvahs that he did, because it can't mean everything that he did, because that's angel number 2. So it seems to be angel number 1 calculates the mitzvahs. Angel number 2 calculates the averos. And angel number 3 is the malach that taught you Torah before you were born. And he comes to see if you kept the Torah. Remember what happens? You learn the Torah before you're born, then the malach hits you and you forget it. But your job in life is to relearn that Torah. So at the end of our lives, that malach comes back to kind of see if we reabsorb the Torah that he taught us. So malach 1 is the cheshvan of my mitzvahs, malach 2 the cheshvan of my averas, malach 3 to see if I learned the Torah that was given to me before I was born. I think we were masber last time that it's not necessarily the case that every person learns the whole Torah before he's born, but the chelik of Torah that's miyuchet to him is what he learns. And the third malach comes to see, did you gain that Torah that you were supposed to learn? You know, they tell a story. I'll tell you a moving maisa, and then I'll tell you a joke on the maisa, which maybe in a way that's not a good sequence because that takes away the hisayrus of the maisa. But they're both interesting points. The Netziv, one of the Netziv's great svarim is Hamik Sheila. Now it's a very unusual topic because the Netziv wrote a perush on the She'ultis. The She'ultis is a sefer of the Gehenom. Very, very people even learn the svarim of the Gehenom. The Netziv wrote a huge, huge perush on the She'ultis of Rav Achai Gain. This is probably the first sefer after the Gemara itself that was written in Halacha. She'ultis Rav Achai Gain. Taisus brings the She'ultis sometimes, but the Netziv Mamash wrote a perush on it when he was a young man. So it's brought down that when he finished the She'ultis, he made a very, very big Suda, very unusual simcha. And people say, well, Baruch Hashem, finishing a sefer is certainly a big simcha. She'ultis is a big sefer also. But you seem to be unusually happy. So the Netziv said, I feel that I now have a pischein pen shamayim when I die. Because it was Yadua, people say that the Netziv was not an Eloi as a child. And the Netziv himself would say he was not always such a big masmid. So one time he overheard his parents talking when he was like 12 or whatever, that, he's not learning so well, maybe we should just apprentice him to be a shoemaker. And whatever, he'll be a balabas who will make a parnasa, be kaveh itim l'tayra. But it's not kedai to send him to yeshiva for such intensive learning. And the Netziv was really hashgacha that he overheard this conversation. But he overheard his parents, and he came in, and somehow that bothered him, and he cried and he sobbed and he begged. So his parents relented. They sent him to yeshiva, to Volozhin Taka, where he eventually became Rosh Yeshiva. And the Netziv eventually became, as it were, one of the great, great Gedolei Hador. So the Netziv said, what would have been had I not overheard my parents? Let's assume they would have sent me to be a shoemaker. I would have been a good shoemaker, he said. I would have been frum. And I would have learned every day. And then I would get married, I would have children. Then I would die. And my neshama would feel, I've done okay. What's wrong? And all of a sudden I go to Olam Haba, and I find all of the malachim, the black malachim, midas hadin, that are not letting me in. Because they show me all of these svarim. They say, you could have written this, you could have done this, you could have done this. This was your life. Where is it? And I would be confused. And I would say, She'ultis. I don't even know what the She'ultis is. He says, I'm a shoemaker. What do you want from me? He says, no, you weren't a shoemaker. You were the person who could have written these svarim. You didn't live the life you were supposed to live. So the Netziv says, at least I know that I passed one test. Maybe there are other things, it's an unknown thing, you never know. But at least I know that this won't be a taina against me. So this is the Maisa, beautiful Maisa about the potential within a person. Now the Yema says, the Welt says this, this is the Nitziv himself said this, and the Welt says the Nitziv was not an Eloi, and all of its Hatzlacha was because of his Yegiya B'Torah. The only question is, I have a question on it chronologically. The Nitziv got married at the age of 14 to Rav Yitzchak of Volozhiner's daughter. He married the granddaughter of Rav Chaim Volozhiner. Now, if the pshat is he wasn't a big Eloi and he wasn't so distinguished, why would Rav Chaim Volozhiner's mishpacha take him in at the age of 14? So that's always bothered me. Now, it is true, the Nitziv writes that many of the members of the family were not machshav him, they made fun of him, but that doesn't mean he wasn't an Eloi. That just means, number one, he was young, and number two, he was learning, he was not so Isaac in Lumdus and Chakiris, he was Isaac more in Bekiyas, Shiltus, Midrashay Halacha, so they thought he was an Amoritz. Okay, that's commonly the yeshiva prejudice that exists in the world. Somebody is Isaac in Yediyah Satira, they're Mizalzel in him. But to say that he wasn't an Eloi, I think, doesn't make sense to me in the sense that 14 years old, he married Rav Chaim Volozhiner's granddaughter, Rav Yitzchak Volozhiner's daughter. Okay. Now, all right, so that's the story. I'm going to tell you a joke. I hope it doesn't ruin the story. But this is from Rav Yeshua, the brisker, Rav Yeshua Soloveitchik, a brisk, where, he was very, very well known for a very, very sharp, very charif, very sharp tongue. So somebody asked him once about whether he liked a certain Rosh Yeshiva's sefer. So he said over the story with the Nitziv, and he said, when it comes to this Rosh Yeshiva, when he comes to Shemayim after 120 years, and he wants to go to Olam Haba, they're going to ask him, where were the shoes? Instead of, where was the sefer? Say, where was the shoes? Okay, the seder, that's, all right. A little bit of a milsa de bdichasa, as it were. Meaning, some people are supposed to write svarim, and some people are supposed to make shoes, right? Instead, so he's suggesting that sometimes it's a shame that it's a chaval that the mechaber, that the shoemaker didn't become a mechaber. He's saying sometimes the mechaber should have been a shoemaker. Okay, I think that's a little mean, but okay. All right, but be it as it may. But this is a ma'aseh with Reb Dessler. When the Chazon Ish was nifter in 1953. So the Chazon Ish, of course, is buried in Bnei Brak. And the Mashgiach of Panovich at the time was Rav Dessler. Rav Dessler was the Mashgiach of Panovich, Michler Melio. And at the Chazon Ish's Levaya, there was a bacher who was crying, sobbing, crying, we lost the Gadol Hador, we lost. So Rav Dessler went over to the bacher and said, why are you crying over the Rav, the Gain, and the Tzaddik who's buried in the ground? That's the Chazon Ish. Then he pointed to the bacher. You should cry over the Rav, the Gain, and the Tzaddik that's buried within you. Because the Rav, the Gain, and the Tzaddik who's in the ground, he became the Rav, the Gain, and the Tzaddik. So, in a sense, we cry because we've lost him, but here was a person who became what he was supposed to become. But what about the tragedy of the Rav and the Gain and the Tzaddik that is within us, that never becomes that? It says, on that, one should cry, Rav Dessler said. That's what you should cry about. Not the Rav HaGain in the ground, but the Rav and the Gain that's buried within you. So the truth is, we all have a tremendous hidden potential. This is not meant to drive a person crazy. A person might go through his whole life and saying, why aren't I Rebbe Kiva? That's not realistic necessarily. And that goes back to the famous Maisa with Rav Zusha. He says, the great Hasidic Rebbe, Rav Zusha, chaver of the Balatanya and Rav Levi Yitzchak of Berdichev, where Rav Zusha says, I'm not afraid that Hashem is going to ask me, why wasn't I Moshe Rabbeinu? Because I'm not. Why wasn't I Avraham Avinu? I'm not afraid of that, because I have a very simple answer. But when he asks me, why wasn't I Rav Zusha or Zusha, then I have a tremendous pachad. That's going to be the real question. Was I the person that I could have been? I could have been. So based on this, I want to just point out, I think I mentioned this, so forgive me if I'm repeating a little bit. We have these three malachim here, right? So malach number one looks at the mitzvahs you did in each minute. Malach number two looks at the Maisa Averas. And malach number three shots us up, did you learn your chaylik in Torah? So there's a famous word from the Gra, right? This is the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos. We say it at a levaya. Histakel b'shleisha devarim. Look at three things. Think about three things. V'ein ata ba lidei aveira. You will not come to an aveira. Da, mi'ayin basa. Where did you come from? Ula'an ata hailech. And where are you going? V'lifnei mi ata asid litein din v'cheshben. And in front of whom are you going to give an accounting of your life? And then the Mishnah goes on and says, Mi'ayin basa, where did you come from? Tipa serucha, you were a little drop of putrid sperm. And where will we be going? The body decomposes, ofar, dirt, tolea, worms. So how insignificant we are. And then remember, who we're going to give a din v'cheshben to. Melech malchei amlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You think of these three things, you will not come lidei aveira. Right? And again, if you've been at a levaya, you know that in Eretz Yisrael, at least they always say, Akavia b'malal leimer, stakol b'shleisha devarim, v'ein atal ba lidei chet. Right? So that's the Mishnah Pirkei Avos. But the Gra is I made on what is the phrase din v'cheshben. Right? We have to give a din v'cheshben. So it's an accounting, right? But what's the double lashon? What's din and what's cheshben? So the Gra says, din is what you did. Cheshben is what you could have done. So like this. It turns out, like the Gra, when I do a Maisa Aveira, right, it's mamish minute by minute, Pasha. If I do an Aveira at 5:12, there are two things Hashem is holding me accounting for. One is the Maisa Aveira I did at 5:12, and the other is the mitzvah that I could have done. Could be learning, could be anything, chesed. That's din v'cheshben. Din is the accounting for what you did. Cheshben is the accounting for what you could have done. And that's a separate thing. That's a din v'cheshben there, Kadosh Baruch Hu. Okay. So I think that might be the difference between the first malach and the second malach, meaning the second malach cheshbens your averas. The first malach cheshbens the mitzvahs, but both in the sense of what you did and in the sense of what you could have done in the minutes of Avera. Din v'cheshben. Okay. Now, to go backwards, though, this is in Sif Yud Aleph, so the Gemara says something at the end of Sif Yud, at least the Evan Shelemah puts it in, and again, it's not clear to me the kesher. He says, we talked about the tzaddik, right? HaKadosh Baruch Hu is molech the tzaddik to his makam in Eilam Haba, and then is maitzi the neshama b'neshika, and the shleisha avos ba'in likrasai, and the end of the Sif Yud says, and the shleisha avos are keneged the three malachim that we described. So again, I'm not exactly sure what it means keneged. I mean, the three malachim are different than the three of us. One malach makes a cheshbon of the mitzvos, and one malach makes the cheshbon of the averos, and one malach is baidek to see if the person was mashlim, he completed his chelik in Torah. So what exactly is the correlation What's the connection between the three malachim and the three avos? So let me just see what it says here. Well, in the footnote here, they bring from the Zayar that has a Kabbalistic drasha by Avraham Avinu, right? When it says, Vayar v'hine shleisha anoshim nitzavim lefanav. Remember, Avraham looks up. This is the third day of his bris, and he sees three human-like figures, anoshim, right? These are the three angels. So the Zayar says, Al Pinister, this is a remez to the Gimel Avais, who are Makabel the Neshama of a Tzaddik. So the Makor of the Gra is the Zayar. And then it gives a Davar Acher, that it's the Gimel Malacha Yashares, HaMavakrim Maisav, B'Shas Misasai. So, I mean, the Zayar doesn't make a correlation. The Zayar just gives two different pshatim on the Sod of Shleisha Anashim Nisavim L'Grasai. Unless the Gra means that this is the difference between a Rasha and a Tzaddik. In other words, the Rasha who suffers through the Malach HaMaves has, everybody's visited by a committee of three. The Tzaddik is visited by the Avos, and the Rasha is visited by the three Malachim. In other words, that's what he means Keneged, meaning the Rasha, the Tzaddik, they get different visitors. Now again, part of the problem with learning all of these things is what definitions are we using for Rasha Tzaddik? I mean, it's very, very clear that we're not simply saying Rubo Zechuyos, Rubo Abonos, which might be the technical definition, but rather a Tzaddik means a very righteous person. A Rasha might mean a very evil person, which of course leaves us the problem of what happens to the Beinoni, what happens to the average person. Which visitors does he get? Does he get the Avais? Does he get the Mavakrim? Right, etc. Again, we Pashut don't know. If it's any comfort, we will know. Unfortunately, we'll find out at the time. But certainly, if you had a choice being visited by the Avais or the equivalent of IRS agents, much worse than IRS agents, we would prefer not to have the IRS visit us, so we try to avoid the Mavakrim. Okay. So that's the description of how the tzaddik is escorted by the Shekhinah till his Makayim in Eilam Haba, and then his neshama is Yaitse b'neshika, and the three Avais are Yaitzen Likrasei. Okay. So now in Sif Yud Aleph, which I already read a little bit of, the Gra is Marech with a little bit more detail on this. And he says there are seven periods of judgment when a person dies. The first judgment is the one we were describing, which is Kaidem Misasai. Right before a person dies. Now, is a person aware of this? Again, we don't know. But before a person dies, the three malachim come. One to make a cheshbon of mitzvahs, one to make a cheshbon of averos, the other to see if you learned the chelak of Torah that was shaykh to you. That is din number one, which is before the Yetzias HaNeshama. Then there is din number two, when the person's body is being carried to a kever. Before burial, a person's body is being transported to the kever. Machrizin lefanav. We don't hear this. I mean, the people who are alive don't hear this. Maybe the person who's dead does hear it, the neshama. Malachim are walking in front of the dead body being carried to the kever. And they are announcing, Vai lepleni demarid b'malka. Alas to Reuven, who rebelled against the king. Meaning, make way because this person might be going to Gehenom. And then he's judged. Now again, I'm not even sure what this means. What do you mean he's judged? He's not punished yet. But it's like, what does it mean you're nidan? Meaning, before his death, the three angels make the calculation. After he dies, on the way to the cemetery, there's a hachraza, vai lepleni demarid b'malka, and then he's judged again. What are you judging him again that was not already nichlal in the first judgment? Okay, we'll come back. The third is when he's buried. So, as I say, this is a very, very shver. The whole passage is very shver, but so far we have three zmanim of din. Somach lemisa. Number one, before kavura. Number two. Number three, when he's put into the kever. Then we have number four, and this already brings in a Kabbalistic term. Din number four is called chibut hakever. Maybe you've come across the lashon. Chibut lachbot is to bang something, like chibut arava, right? Chibut. So chibut hakever literally means there's a certain agitation of the body in the kever itself. Now that doesn't mean that the physical movement of the body, but it's a certain agitation, it's a certain agmas nefesh, it's a certain anxiety that the neshama is margish when the guf goes in, even though the neshama is not in the guf, right? But the neshama is margish, as if the body is being shaken up. And what is that? Nidain kol eiver v'eiver shenanim in ha'olam shaloi k'mitzvah. Every single aver that got pleasure that was not l'shem mitzvah, there's a certain einish on that aver. Remember Rav Yehuda Hanassi, Rabbeinu HaKadosh, right before his death, he lifted up his 10 fingers to Shemayim. And he said, Ribbono shel olam, goloi v'yadua lefanecha. You know, there was not a single pleasure any of my Avarim got that was not for the purpose of serving you. And this is in spite of the fact that the Gemara says Rav Yehuda Hanassi was very rich, very wealthy. He was very close to the emperor or governor, depending on what it means, Antoninus. And they used to have, they used to have like all sorts of vegetables that the whole year, things that don't grow in the winter months, they managed to import and the like. So Rebbe lived what you might call a luxurious life. Rebbe did not live in poverty. But he was made on himself that every single pleasure that he took from Olam Hazeh was l'shem mitzvah. So chibut hakever, the Gemara says, is when the body is judged for all the pleasures that we took that were not l'shem mitzvah. The fifth is tailas, when worms consume the body. The sixth is kaf hakela. So the two terms that appear in Kabbalah a lot, in terms of the afflictions that a person suffers before they go to Gehenom, is called chibut hakever and kaf hakela. Chibut hakever literally means the banging or the agitation or the shaking in the grave. Kaf hakela is a slingshot. That's where, as it were, the neshama is put in a slingshot and it's shot one end of the world to the other end of the world. Once again, we don't know b'diuk what this is, but it expresses a sense of restlessness, of loss, of not having a makom. And indeed, this is a description that we have. This is not talking about tzaddikim. But when people are not at tzaddik, and then we have Gehenom, right? What is described is the neshama separates from the guf. What is really being described here is the neshama is in a state of confusion. It doesn't really know where it's supposed to go, and it doesn't know where it belongs. It feels connected to the guf. Right? It's looking down at the guf. It says, hey, that's me. In fact, even people that have near-death experiences describe this phenomenon. It's as if they're out of body and they're looking down. And they hear everybody surrounding the body saying, oh, let's try to revive the person or whatever it is. So, chibut hakever and kaf hakela, without knowing the differences between them, that refers to the notion of, well, chibut hakever is you suffer as your body suffers, so to speak. Kaf hakela is you're separated from your body, but you don't have any makam, like you're going from one end of the world to the other end of the world, not knowing your makam. Then there's Gehenom, and Gehenom at least, remember what's the purpose of Gehenom? This is a very important point. The tachlis of Gehenom is to remove impurities and blemishes so your neshama will be able to get the Olam Haba for the mitzvahs that you've done. The Gemara pointed this out earlier, that there is, very blessedly, a tremendous asymmetry between the punishments for Averas and the rewards for mitzvahs. The punishment for Averas is temporary. The reward for mitzvahs is eternal. So we say even a Rosh Hashanah only goes to Gehenom for Yud Beis Chodesh. That's why we only say Kaddish for 11 months. A person is not supposed to be machzik a parent to be a Rosh Hashanah. What happens after the 12 months? The person's neshama has been repaired. Now that they're repaired, they go to Olam Haba for whatever mitzvahs they've done. Now granted, they're not going to be in the same madrega as the tzaddik, but at least they'll be in Olam Haba. So the purpose of Gehenom is spiritual therapy. This is an important idea. It's not the notion of God punishing you, but God is purifying you so you will be able to have the capacity to be nana miziv hashchina for whatever mitzvahs you've done, whatever madrega it is. Right? Again, physical therapy is a perfect analogy. Let's say a person, God forbid, broke his legs very badly, multiple fractures. So the person might have to spend months and months and months learning how to walk again. And that can be excruciatingly painful. And when the person is forced to do these exercises, the person will be crying and screaming and begging his family to let him go to bed, let him sit in bed. And it's very, very emotional, it's very gut-wrenching. But they have to make him go on and on and on and on, because that's the only way he'll get better and be able to walk. So Gehenom is awful. 1 second of Gehenom is worse than any tsar of Olam Hazeh. But it has a tachlis. The tachlis of Gehenom is to repair a broken neshama. So it's capable of a devekus with Hashem in Olam Haba, because when it's broken, it can't receive the light of Hashem. So Gehenom is a chesed of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. that it basically says that even if a person is so broken that they're not able to receive the Ohr of Hashem, Hashem will give them a tikkun, a restoration, a factory to fix broken neshamas. In Olam Hazeh, it might be Yisurin, and that's actually a much better deal, much better to get it here than Gehenom. But if we don't get it in Olam Hazeh, then Gehenom, you need more. In other words, it requires more work, more difficulty, more suffering. So, what's not, again, so many things here are not clear, but apparently before Gehenom, we have Chibut HaKever, we have Kaf HaKela, and we have Tolas. So he does mention 3 pre-Gehenom stages of purification. Apparently, you have to be on a certain madrega to get into Gehenom. You have to earn Gehenom. And the Kaf HaKela, and the Chibut HaKever, and the Tolas, Dina the Tolata, are pre-Gehenom experiences that the neshama goes through, and then it goes to Gehenom. Not more than Yud Beis Chodesh, sometimes 1 minute. Some people go to Gehenom for 1 minute. And then Olam Haba. So, the question that's bothered me for years already, and I don't really have a yishuv, means, apparently, the logic of Gehenom should actually mean that eternal damnation doesn't make sense. Meaning like this. There are people who don't have Olam Haba, that's for sure, right? There are many situations where a person who doesn't do tshuva does not have a chelek in Olam Haba. The Rambam writes in the Yud Gimel Ikrei Amun, the Rambam writes in Tshuva, essentially, if you're kaifer in the Yud Gimel Ikrei, any one of the Yud Gimel Ikrei Amun, you don't have a chelek in Olam Haba. Other Averis. Most Averis, the Rambam says, you have you go to Gehenom, and then you have Olam Haba. But there are some in Yonim in which you don't have a chelek in Olam Haba. So, let me ask this question. If, God forbid, it's adjudicated that a person does not have a chelek in Olam Haba, what happens to that person when that person dies? A person dies without a chelek in Olam Haba. Does he go to Gehenom? And for how long? So the truth of the matter is, if the person will not be able to have a chelek in Olam Haba, there is no purpose in sending him to Gehenom. In other words, essentially what that means is the neshama is broken beyond repair. If a neshama is broken beyond repair, the logical response is throw it in the garbage, not torture it. Which means a Rasha who will be Zaychet Olam Haba, so we put him through Gehenom to repair him, so he'll be Zaychet Olam Haba. But a person who does not have a share in Olam Haba, putting aside Gilgal can always be a second chance, but putting aside the idea of Gilgal, what would be the purpose of torturing him? He's broken. So that would mean what should happen to him when he dies is obliteration. He just ceases to exist. Now, you might even say that's not even a punishment in a sense, because a person who does not exist is not aware that they don't exist. That seems to be the case, although, who knows. If you don't exist, you don't... Now, a person can have a tremendous pain contemplating that after... this is what fear of death is for people. A person can have a tremendous fear contemplating what it's like not to exist. But when you're in the actual state of non-existence, presumably that means there's no hargasha, right? No consciousness of not existing. And I have to say the Rambam's lashon in Hilchos Tshuva is mashma, like I'm saying. The Rambam says, when the Rambam enumerates people who do not have a share in Olam Haba, the Rambam's lashon is nichrasen. They're just cut off. Meaning, it seems there's no Gehenom for them. And to me that's quite logical, because Gehenom is a rehabilitation device. It's not a torture chamber. And if there's no rehabilitation for this person, then you simply put him out of his misery. So, if one were to ask, does Judaism believe that some people can be so evil, no, Hitler or whoever, that they burn in Gehenom forever and ever and ever? There is a very good svara to say such a thing is not shayach. On the other hand, and I think the Rambam might support that, on the other hand, there are makairis in Chazal that talk about Rishayim who burn in Gehenom, suffer in Gehenom, and of course it's spiritual suffering, forever. And one of the big kashas I have, it's a kasha you can think about, is what exactly is the tachlis, mitzad Hashem, what is the tachlis of people burning in Gehenom forever? Like why? What is that accomplishing? I mean, yeah, it's a punishment, it's a revenge, but if we understand punishment to be tikkun and purification, then how is it shaykh for there to be a punishment that never ends? Nothing's getting masukin, nothing's getting rectified, nothing's getting fixed, nothing's getting repaired. So, God forbid to talk this way, but it becomes an act of sadism at that point. On the other end, emotionally, we certainly want to feel. Hitler burns in Gehenom forever, that's what we want to feel. But, well, feelings are one thing, but is that truly a svara that there should be such a thing?
Can it be that it like causes people that are alive to be?
Yeah. So that might be one taina. One taina might be that even if something is not a tikkun mitzad the person undergoing it, but by other people, by people alive being aware that this could be the end of the road, so that prevents other Hitlers from, at least some people who would otherwise be Hitler are not going to be Hitler because of that idea, and Memela, it's part of the tikkun ha'olam, even though it's not a tikkun mitzad that individual person. Yeah. Will that become a zechus? But apparently not. In other words, we're not going to say, hey, it's like, it reminds me like the Gemara in Avodah Zarah. Remember, it says the Romans are going to say, we built so many bridges, we built so many palaces, we did it all for the Jewish people. They benefit from all of these things. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, you didn't do it for them, right? You did it for you. You're not going to get reward. I say that the Reform movement will have a similar taina. When HaKadosh Baruch Hu calls the leaders of the Reform movement to a din v'cheshbon, they're going to have a very good defense. They say, we brought into the world Sfarim that are so important Sfarim. Because of us, Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch wrote on the Torah, and the Malbim wrote on Nach, and the Ksava Kabbalah, and Rav David Tzvi Hoffman, he says, without us, you wouldn't have had any of that stuff, because the truth is they did write their Sfarim to combat the Reform movement, right? So the Reform movement could say, we brought so much Torah to Am Yisrael. The answer is going to be the same answer. Was that your kavanah? Is that why you did it? You don't realize without the Reform movement there wouldn't have been a Hirsch commentary or a Malbim, whatever it would be. It's all legamri because of the Reform movement that these Sfarim were bichlal written. Yeah, I mean I hear what you're saying. Again, I just have a little bit of a problem that Ruvain suffers forever because it'll be Masakin Shimon. One could question that. But still, there's something to think about, the notion of eternal Christianity, Lahavdil, obviously talks about eternal damnation. In fact, according to them, all of us have eternal damnation because we're not Maimon in their thing. But in Judaism, I don't know, and it could be the emphasis, the Rambam I don't know how he'll learn all the Lashonos in Chazal, but the Rambam seems to indicate that there's really no such musag, that Gehenom has to be therapeutic and reparative. And when it's not going to repair, so you have obliteration. You don't have eternal einish. Okay. But the point, once again, is that the Gemara says that there are 3 pre-Gehenom types of Einshim: Chibud HaKever, Taimas, Gehenom. And as I say, you need a certain measure of progress before you can even go into Gehenom to get fixed up. And those are what these stages represent. Okay, we'll stop here and check. See what's in it.